Hello, everybody, and welcome to one more live session of the Agile Online Summit. And for this session, I have the pleasure of having with me Markus Hammarberg. Hey, Markus, welcome.
Hello, Vasco. Nice to meet you. Your pronunciation of my surname improves by the time we meet. So
Yeah, I don't know how good it is, but hey, at least I've been practicing.
yeah, it's really you're up there. I will soon take you for a fin.
All right. So, for those of you who haven't discovered it yet, Markus is also an author. He authored, there we go.
Yeah.
I have to put myself in front. All right. Salvation, the Bungsu Story, which is an amazing book. I recommend to everybody. And I don't just say that because I was the editor for the book. I say that because it really is a great book with a lot of insights and applying a lot of the ideas that Markus is going to share with us today. We're going to talk about theory of constraints and how Markus got his broken fingers.
Yeah, I actually
Markus, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing these days?
So I've been an agile coach for a very long time, and then I took a break from that and became a teacher. So I started a school to teach people how to do software development. But after 5 years with that company, I think it actually took a big toll out of me. So I decided to step down from that. And I'm now working with Mr. Data in Sweden, Lars Albertsson. And we have a data engineering platform as a service. So now I'm in school, you can say, because I've been learning so much this last semester that I basically the first day back at work, as you soon will hear about, I was like, yeah, what was I even doing here? I didn't remember a thing when I started off, but it's been really, really fun learning data engineering, learning 2 new programming languages. And the thing that is really cool with Lars is that his and my interest align really well in lean. So with lean and agile, we're building something there together there. So that's what I'm going to do once we get a little bit larger than we are right now. Now I'm more like the sweeping guy, trying to get things to work that others have failed with, or that I have caused problems with even. So, yeah. I lost you.
And of course, we're going to talk about riding a bike, or was it a scooter?
No, it was a bike. It was a bike. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
So programming for you is a little bit like riding a bike, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to get back on it.
Yeah, exactly. No, most definitely. And it just struck me that when you have learned a lot for a short period of time, you forget a lot in a short period of time, in a short while as well. So coming back was very much like starting over. But it all came back to me fast, as you say, like riding a bike. Although I frown on that joke nowadays, but
yeah, it's a little bit too close to home.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It's painful in my hand when I think about the jokes like that.
Okay, but you are fully recovered. We're going to talk about broken fingers, but you are fully recovered, right?
I am. The only thing I can't really make a fist with this hand, so it's still a little bit. What do you say? Stiff. But I'm getting there. It will take some time to gymnastic it back into shape. But I can move everything that needs to be moved for my daily work. So yeah, that's just fine.
All right, absolutely. So it's just time. So welcome everybody. We have with us Markus Hammarberg, who's going to talk to us about theory of constraints and how a programmer can overcome 2 broken fingers. Unfortunately, people were harmed in the making of this talk.
Yeah,
Markus,
I was.
And Markus will talk all about that in a second. So welcome, Markus.
Thank you so much, Vasco. Happy to be here.
But there are other sessions on the Agile Online Summit. Later today, also live, I'll be interviewing Raphael Branger, who's also an author, just like Markus, and he authored this book, how to succeed with Agile business intelligence. And if you want to know more, just stick around. It will be here on the YouTube channel, and we can talk about that in a minute. Check that out at agileonlinesummit.com. Now, Marcus, when I was preparing the questions for today's interview, I was reminded that a very famous programmer, Richard Stallman, also went through a spell when he couldn't type. He had some hand pain. I don't know exactly what kind of pain it was, but he ended up hiring typists to type for him. So tell us your story. How did you end up with 2 broken fingers, and of course then what were the consequences? Because you're, at the end of the day, you're a programmer.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I didn't know that story, and it's actually a common problem with programmers, that we get fatigues in our hands, and some people get so much pain that they actually cannot use their hands. And I have some tips for that later. So what happened to me was that me and my one of my sons, we were riding our bikes going to a concert in the summer, first week of vacation. Everything was wonderful. And my chain made a weird noise, so I looked down, and when I looked up, someone was standing right in the middle of the biking road, and I barely missed her, because I like turned the bike so a little bit like that, but so I didn't hurt her so much. Actually, I didn't hurt her at all, because she went from the crash site to holding a aerobics pass in the conducting an aerobics pass, so she was okay. But I crashed, and I realized that I'm not that young anymore. A few more kilos and a little bit more stiffness in joints and bones, and so I broke my hand. I landed, and my fingers were actually pointing all over the place. So I dislocated 3 fingers and broke 2 of them.
Ouch!
Yeah, it was extremely painful. But as some people might know about me from my my avatars all over, my big passion in life is playing an instrument called the euphonium. And every euphonium player or every brass band player in the world, the first thing we think, and this actually happened, was when I landed, I was like, it was not the right hand, right? it was the right hand, because you play with the right hand, right? So that was my first thing. But I was taking very good care of, and I got a cast, and they told me like, this will be 6 weeks in a cast, and then you will be super stiff, as I showed before. I still to this day, I cannot make a full fist like that. So my fist on the first day after taking off the cast looked like this. This was my fist, so super stiff, but I could make small movements like that after taking the cast. So I just realized, just as you said, like, I'm not going to be able to type. I'm going to be in cast for at least 2 weeks when I come back from the vacation, and then it will be yet some more things. So I started to try to resolve this situation. So I actually started to learn to play the euphonium with the wrong hand, which looks super weird for people knowing how to play. But I have a video that we can share later if you want to. But it would be, for people that don't play, it would be to see someone type by doing this, crossing your arms. It looks super weird.
And of course, this had direct consequences on your work, because you're a programmer.
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays, I'm a full-time programmer. So I just realized, like, I have 7 fingers that could actually be in use, because the rest of them was in a cast. So I started to think about how can I solve this problem. And the first thing I realized was I actually thought a lot about work in process and keeping the work in process low, because now I had only one working hand. So everything that you do now has to be done with one hand instead of 2. So my working process was limited a lot. Just taking something out of a cupboard, for example. You can't do that. Typically, you take something out like that, and now open the door, take the thing down, close the door. So it's much less things in action at the same time. And what I realized is that even though I'm like very limited, I'm not 100% out. I still have 7 fingers, so I actually could do some typing it was extremely slow and awkward, but I could at least work, right? And as I said, I could play my instrument backwards, which was not really great as well.
Did you actually learn to play the euphonium backwards?
I did.
Wow.
Let me see. Can I share like a screen? No. Okay. I'll link a video where I'm playing it backwards. So it was, and that was actually interesting in itself, because when you say that, and when you say like, you're gonna type with 7 fingers, it feels like you're not useful. This will not make any sense. But to be honest, it was much easier to learn than I thought. I made it into a bigger problem than it actually was, because I never tried it. And once I started to do that, I realized like, yeah, you know what, my brain could actually translate that for me. So it was a little bit easier. But I was also now confined to the apartment, because it was super hot in Sweden this summer, and I couldn't be outside with the cast because that was just sweaty. So I was in my apartment, and I started to research voice to text, right?
So that was the first idea that came up, right? Like, okay, if I can't use more than 7 fingers, why not just use some voice typing?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I was thinking like, surely this has to be solved, right? Like in this day of AI all over and chat GTP and everything, this has to be solved. And also I became a power user of my phone speech to text. Right? So I was talking a lot with my phone assistants here, and that works really, really well. It works much better than you would think once you get to understand like a few commands. But when I started to research that, I found that either the thing that was that was present was either a lot of configuration needed in order to get it to work, or there was like waiting lists or high fees and everything. So I didn't really find anything good. And also, I think I made the problem a little bit easier than it actually is, because speech to text is easy, right? You just say the words, but you would never program like that. Because if you think about what you're writing when you're programming, it's like, then do a curly brace and now a new line and then move up.
It's a lot harder to voice dictate the programming.
Exactly, and you don't think like that either when you're programming, because you think in higher abstractions like that. So I was super happy when I found a tool called Serenade.ai. It's free, and it's really, they have an amazing tutorial. You feel like a power user after just going through the tutorial. So I can most definitely recommend that. But what they were doing that was really great was that they allowed you to speak about code rather than to say in a specific words or letters even. So you could say things like, add a parameter to this method, and it would understand that I'm in a method now, and that method belongs to a class, so I'm going to add it to this method, and then I can move this method to the end of the class, and it would understand.
So let me guess. So the first thing you tried was to actually voice type the details, and you very quickly realized that, okay, this is not going to work.
Yeah, no, that was just too awkward. And what I realized is that you don't type as much as navigate. So code is much more reading and navigating, and like, oh, what was that parameter now again? And then you go back and forth in trying things out. So you writing code is actually not like the main thing of to do, and we'll get back to that in a while.
So we're starting to see kind of the cycle here, if I get it right. So you first started by, hey, I can voice type, and that didn't work so well. So what can I find that would help me voice type code?
Yeah.
That led you to Serenade AI. But of course, voice doesn't have autocomplete either, right?
No, but what they do have is that was really good, that tool, because you could speak in refactorings. So you could say like, rename this method, and it would automatically rename it in every place where it was used. And imagine doing that with the Siri, for example. That would be horrible, right? You will like, now go up 2 lines, and I don't even know if Siri has those kinds of instructions, right? So, and to be quite honest, Vasco, what I first tried was to type with these fingers, or actually these fingers at the beginning. And to be honest, that was, I mean, at least easier, because now I had the same interface. But exactly as you're doing now, that's where I ended up, and I started to think about theory of constraints. And theory of constraints, for those that haven't heard about it, is a set of thinking tools, basically, about improving flow in processes. And it was formulated by a man called Elijah Goldratt, and it's described in an amazing book called The Goal, that everyone that wants to write a business novel is aiming to copy his amazing book. But it's really, really good, actually, The Goal. It exists as a comic book now. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. Yeah, definitely need to check that out.
Yeah, that's really weird to read a business book as a comic, but hey. So, and very shortly, what it starts off with is an idea about that every process has a limiting factor, or something, a bottleneck that limits flow of value. And if it didn't, for example, in a system development process, you would have a feature in production the second you thought about it. It's not, there's something limited. So it's not really bad that it's limited. It's just something that we need to work around in order to do that. And he has 5, what he calls focusing steps in order to get there. And the first step is to identify the bottleneck. What is limiting flow? And to be honest, in some processes that can be really hard to find, especially in processes that takes place in your head. Because in a factory, you would see a big pile of inventory in front of a bottleneck, right? And very little inventory after the bottleneck. For me, it was pretty simple, right? I saw my hand and I saw, okay, so now I have 4 fingers.
Typing is the bottleneck, or so we thought at start.
Yeah, exactly. That was my initial thought. That was, as you said, like that was my knee-jerk reaction, was to try to fix that. And once you have identified the bottleneck, the easy thing to think is like, okay, so we're going to fix that by adding more resources. For example, Richard Stallman hired a typist. I actually had people volunteer to be my full-time mob driver. That would have been cool, but I don't think that we would have been friends for a very long time.
Yeah, I think that was the problem with Richard Stallman as well.
Yeah, if I'm only dictating what you're typing, I don't know. No, but instead, what Elijah Goldratt tells us is like the second step. Once you have identified the bottleneck, the second step is to exploit the resource to its full potential. And I think this is better described, not with my hand maybe, but with another example. And I worked at a team once where we had 12 developers, I think we were, and only 2 testers. So the testers were fully choked, like they had so much things to do. And the first thing we did was to ensure that they only did testing. Because it turned out that they did a lot of other things than just testing. For example, they had to fix things that was not properly installed on the testing environment. So with a very simple little change, we actually made a little checklist for each developer where they had to check off, like, I have verified that the feature works in the testing environment. And that offloaded the testers so that they could spend their time doing the bottleneck work, so to speak. Mm. And this is what I meant by when I started to realize that I was absolutely hampered, but I was not 100% out. I still had 7 fingers. So if really needed, I could type, but it was slower. So now ensure that I would only do typing. There's still value to be done, right? So I could do that. And as I said, I started to evaluate other things as well. So that's identify the bottleneck. We know where the bottleneck is, and now ensure that it's exploited to its full potential. So it's only doing bottleneck work, for example. And the third step is not also is neither to add in more resources. It's actually to subordinate the rest of the process. So, for example, what we started to do in the testing case was that we asked the developers to do some simple verifications by themselves. So once you handed a feature over to testing, you would say, like, I've installed it in the testing environment. I've tested A, B, and C. Is there anything else that you want me to test? And then the tester could say, yeah, could you verify this? And so that meant that once the work reached the bottleneck, it's in much better shape, meaning that we actually know that it will pass through the bottleneck smoother. Because remember, the bottleneck is what's limiting flow in the process. So any improvement that you make anywhere else will not have any effect on
and also sacrificing productivity somewhere else for the benefit of the bottleneck makes the whole system more productive.
Yeah, exactly, and at least that will not hamper the flow in the chain, because that's not the bottleneck. So you only need to manage the bottleneck in a proper way.
Which kind of highlights how important it is not to focus on, and many of our viewers, of course, have heard this, don't maximize utilization, don't make sure everybody's busy, because that doesn't help anyone. In fact, it makes the bottleneck even slower, right? Like the focus should be on maximizing the throughput at the bottleneck step. And even if that requires reducing productivity in some other step.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I mean, I'm sure that everyone has been in projects where people ask you to once you don't have anything else to do, pick up something new, right? And what you end up with is just overloading the bottleneck. So they will now not only have be full capacity, but also have a queue of things to do. So in my case, what I started to do was that I tried to subordinate this, and that's when I explored other ways to do that. For example, having a tool to type for me. Or in Richard Stallman's case, like hiring someone. No comparison other than that. I don't have his hair or anything, right? So, yeah.
And you didn't author Emacs either?
No, most definitely. To be honest, I haven't used Emacs. I did once, but I didn't get out of it. So, yeah. So that's the first step: identify the bottleneck, exploit it to the full potential, make sure that all the processes around it is subordinate to the fact that this is the bottleneck, and helping the bottleneck will help the system. And then once you reach the fourth step, then it's valuable to start to elevate the bottleneck. And in my case, that's where I was using this tool in order to elevate it. But then I hit the fifth step, and the fifth step is one step that it feels like it's just written in there because of course you need to put it in there, but it's probably the most important step of all, and it's repeat. Meaning go back to number one and start over, because the bottleneck might have moved. And indeed, what happened in our example with the testers was that with our very simple little tweaks of the process to ensure that everything was installed properly and actually did what it was supposed to do, we moved the bottleneck really quickly. So now all of a sudden the testers were not the bottleneck anymore. So what I did was that I identified the bottleneck. I cannot type as fast as I used to, and I tried to do that with like 7 fingers, and then I used a tool, and then I came back to work, and I learned something about myself and Serenade AI. And because when I started to use it for real, not only practicing, because I did some practicing at home first, and when I started to use it for real, it typed some really weird code. And I was so surprised because it went like spot on all the time. And I was so surprised to see that the code that was typed for real didn't really match what I was wanting to be typed. And I just realized that I'm talking to myself when I'm coding. So when I'm coding, I'm writing out a for loop, and then hold on now, no, I need to loop over in reverse order and then take every other element. If you say that into a microphone with an AI listening, it will type that. It will try to make sense out of it. So a fun little side thing is that I told my wife and also my colleague Lars, I told them, like, apparently I'm talking to myself when I'm typing. And they were like, yeah, we know that.
Everybody knew except you.
Yeah, exactly. You don't say, right? Yeah, so that was weird. And what I realized when I came to that point was that Serenade AI is really great. It was actually a super useful tool for me. But the main constraint is not typing. I've been saying this for a long time, right? It's not that if I had 3 hands, I would be a more productive developer. Have you seen that? I think there's like a CI kind of, one of these series where they're trying to catch a burglar that's doing a hacking of them, and they try to protect themselves. And in order to help out, there are 2 people at the keyboard. You will not be more productive if you had 4 hands, right? That's not really it. And why, really? Because, I mean, we're typing, right? We're writing code. Well, it turns out that software development is not manufacturing. So development means that we're making one thing that probably have not existed before, at least not in our little context. It's not like we're inventing the cure for cancer or anything like that, but it's an innovation in its own right. And innovation is seldom solved by typing. It's solved by thinking. So the main bottleneck is in here. And for me, that was the revelation that I saw, was that Serenade AI started to type what I thought. And my thoughts were very often like going back and forth. Oh no, hold on, no, let's go back. And then, oh no, that's not right. And but what does that really pass? And oh, now I need that parameter here. That's the kind of thinking that's going on in my head. What happened here was that I had to externalize it, since I didn't have a keyboard. Or I didn't use the keyboard as much. So I externalized it, and it was so apparent to me, like, typing is not the constraint. I mean, obviously, I hear you tapping along in the background, and obviously, I mean, that fast, I couldn't write with 7 fingers. So I was most definitely hampered. But I would be hard-pressed to say that if I only could type faster, I would have finished all my features faster, for example. That was not what was holding me down. So I started to use Serenade AI for some things, but to be quite honest, I ended up using 5 plus 2 fingers. And then it turned out that using my fingers was a really good exercise once I took the cast off. So that was good. It was pretty painful, but it was good to like have them.
Yeah, it's physiotherapy, right?
Right. And it's
reactivate the muscles, the tendons, and so on.
Exactly, and it's tiny movements.
This is an interesting kind of turn of events. I didn't expect us to get here as you were telling the story, but now that you describe it, it starts to make sense in my mind. So you started first by, okay, the bottleneck is my hands, right? I don't have the full use of both hands, so I need to find something else to type for me. And then you found something, and you even found something that worked really well.
Yeah.
But then as you started using that, the Serenade AI product, then you realize that actually I'm spending most of my time thinking about what to type. I'm not spending most of my time typing.
Yeah, right. And once I end up typing, what I usually do, if there's a lot of typing to be done, usually you could copy that. Usually you have it somewhere else, but you need to tweak it somehow. And that's not really typing either. That's not like typing a text, for example. If I was an author or needed to like type out some, maybe that could hold me back while typing. But in this case, I didn't really feel like I was limited by by my limited number of fingers.
All right, but then this brings up another question, which is, of course, I don't know if you went there, but let's go there now, which is, all right, so if the bottleneck is thinking, then how do I exploit the resource to its full potential?
Exactly. No, that's absolutely a place that I went. And as I said, I've been creating a school for the software developers or for programmers, and we did something that is unique, as I know, in the world. And we did all our work in mob programming mobs. And the main reason for that was exactly what you said now. If you're super confused about how something works and how to do that, what's the best way of learning that fast? Well, for me, at least, a really good way is to have someone next to me that I can talk about that also is working with the same thing as me, meaning that we're at the same place, thinking about the same problem and solving it with the same kind of tools. Because, I mean, obviously, I could phone you up and say like, hey, Vasco, how do you do this in Python? But then I would pull you out of your context and into my context, and you have to switch, and I have to describe where I am. If you're working in pairs or in mobs, you always have someone that's thinking about the same problem at the same time, right? So, and that's a really good way of learning fast, I think, and learning of solving the thinking problem. And again, speaking about AI, what I ended up doing, to be honest, don't tell Lars, but to be honest, is that I've started to use ChatGPT as my programming buddy. So.
Tell us a bit more about that. How does that go?
Yeah, so it's confession time, I feel now. I hate regular expressions with the heat of 1,000 suns. I usually tell people that I've learned regular expressions 5 times. Okay, so I can't remember how to do that. But why should I spend time on doing that? So what I did instead was I headed over to ChatGPT and just typed like, I want these to match and these to not match. Can you write me a regular expression for that? And sure enough,
and then you could just copy paste and test it and make sure that it works. So this is actually a specific type of bottleneck for one specific activity, which is interesting for our discussion here, which is, of course, access to knowledge that only comes with experience, especially things that are not logical at all unless you know all the details. Then you need to write, like, have a dictionary basically in the back of your mind, or ask a computer to do it for you. And as Agent Smith said in The Matrix, never send a human to do a machine's job.
Yeah,
right?
exactly that.
And so what you figured out is, okay, so my bottleneck is now access to a dictionary, right? The dictionary for regular expression. So what could I use that would be the dictionary, right? And ChatGPT can become that.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I was super surprised that it's not only really good in doing that, but it also presents it in a really nice way. It really wants me to learn because it will tell me how everything works like that and stuff like that. And I actually used it for other things as well, even research. It was like, this tool that I'm using here, would it even be possible to do feature X in that? Can I generate the report using this tool? And they say, yeah. He came back and said, you know what? They have talked about that, but it's actually not on there. Yeah. So it was, that's one way of using. I mean, now I was actually working alone, so I didn't have someone to bother all the time, right? But I used ChatGPT for that. But when it comes to, and I think what you're alluding to here, I have never thought about that either, actually, but that's probably why I'm talking to myself. So I'm not sure if everyone listening knows about rubber duck programming. Have you heard about this?
I have heard, but explain it to us.
So it's a super cool little hack where you invest in buying a rubber duck. It could basically be anything, but something with a face is a good thing to have on your table. And if you encounter a problem, you explain the problem to the rubber duck. So you talk to it and you say like, you know what, I need to loop through these, and then for everyone I need, and by explaining it, what happened is that you understand the problem better. And that's why I'm talking out loud to myself.
You're doing mirror rubber ducking.
Yeah. And now I need to buy a rubber duck. I just realized that. Yeah. No, so that's probably it, right? Because I externalize my inner thoughts, which is exactly what happens when you do pair programming and mob programming as well. The main value there is to verbalize what you have in your head, and then you will get other people's opinion on that, or other people's input on how to do that.
And actually, that's something ChatGPT can do for you. It doesn't necessarily say anything like correct, but it might trigger thinking on your part. And of course, when you explain it, you are also thinking through the problem once more and trying to structure it and, as you say, externalize it in a way that others, in this case ChatGPT, could understand. I can totally see why that would help with the thinking part of the bottleneck.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point there, I've yet to copy some code from ChatGPT straight off, but I have got really good starting points, and I got past the hump many times. It's like, so that's how you do it. For example, like let's go back to regular expressions. Even though I have regular expressions, how would I use? I'm programming in Scala and Python right now, and both of them are new languages to me. So I need a little function that checks these regular expressions and only returns the ones that match. That could take hours to figure out if you're like fiddling with by yourself. But if you ask ChatGPT it can easily wrap it. Can you now wrap that regular expression in a Scala function? Boom. Right? Why should I spend time on doing that? Now I can think about the real problems. How am I going to use that? Will this be performant? Can I test this? All of those things. Right?
And that actually is, if I remember correctly, it is step 3, right? Like you use other resources to make the bottleneck more productive, right? You subordinate others in order to make the bottleneck more productive.
Exactly that. And it's not like hiring another person. So it's not costly. It's just like I'm taking load off my brain into doing that. So to be going back to the typing, then my 7 fingers could be spent typing the real value. Like, for example, copying that code and then tweak it, rather than to type out all of the code, because that would take a long time.
Yeah, there's another step that you didn't talk about, and for the programmers out there, I'm sure that you have thought about this, which is of course to go to Google, ask it, and then look at 20 or 30 different possible answers and figure out which one works for you, and so on and so forth. So there's also a lot of research that you don't need to do, because ChatGPT does for you. So that's another way in which you can take a shortcut.
Yeah.
For me, the cool thing about this thought process that you just explained us is this disciplined approach to looking at a problem, in this case a bottleneck, by using a specific way to tackle that problem. And the specific way in which we are talking about, which is theory of constraints, and I'll put the links down below for everybody to go and check them out. But theory of constraints is a context neutral thinking process. It's called the 5 focusing steps, so that you focus on what needs to be done in order to get what you want in the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're touching on now is a thing that I've seen hampering people a lot, right? Can you take a context, something that has been mostly applied in one industry or one context, and move it over to another? So you were flashing my book, the Bungsu, the Salvation Story. What I did in this book, what I did there was that I actually applied Agile or Kanban to a hospital management group. That's all I did. I don't know how to run a hospital. I know how to get stuff done. I even told them, and they got really scared about that. But I even told them, like, you need to do the work. I can help you to get the work done. And it was not something amazing I did. I just applied a thinking tool. And as you said, theory of constraints is firstly described in industry and factories and stuff like that, but it can be applied to anything that you're doing. And I was so amazed that I fell into my own trap, so to speak, because I mean, what could be more obvious than a big blue cast over your hand when you're working with two hands, right? Obviously, this is the bottleneck, right? I can see it.
And it happens all the time. And it's not a problem, because if you use the 5 focusing steps, you will find the actual bottleneck just by applying the process.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it's so easy. What I was like, because I thought like, yeah, surely I didn't. I have written many times, I've said many times in front of people, typing is not the constraint. But as you said, and I didn't want to jump there too fast, but I think we kept them on, the suspense going here. But as you said, the first thing I did was to start to examine ways to type faster. I didn't even think about, will this even be a problem? Right? So that's absolutely something that I
and many of us do the same, and of course the managers we work with do the same, and the team members we work with do the same. And the cool thing about us, for us as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, is that if we apply the 5 focusing steps, it doesn't matter where we start, we will always find the real bottleneck. And that's something that I have very often had trouble explaining to others, which is that it doesn't really matter where we start if we have a clear idea of what the process is that we need to apply and a clear idea of what value is, right? Then we can always find the value, and we can always find the bottleneck.
Yeah, exactly. And your 2 things about what you said now. The real problem for what I've seen is to find the value, like defining what is better. That's why I've seen people have really different opinions about that, and we're working without really knowing what better is, right? As you said, like just output features faster. What about if those features are not used by anyone? They are truly useless, right? So,
which is where you went, right? Like you started first, code is the output, and then you figured out that actually no, code is the visible part of the output. The real output is thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the solved problems. Dan North has such a nice little thought experiment about this. It goes like this: what is the most productive day a developer can have? It's a day when he removed code and the system was better, right? So now you have negative output in lines of code, right? I have had many days where where it felt really, really good, and the best thing I did was that I actually removed a lot of code. So the total number of lines of code in the code base is now smaller.
Absolutely.
And another thing that I thought about, I just wanted to say that is a quote that I heard from Woody Sully, the guy that came up with mob programming and also talked a lot about no estimates. But he said, like, it's to your point, like, it doesn't really matter where we start. We had a discussion, he and I, about prioritization. And he said, I think that we spend a lot of time trying to find the most important when it's enough to do something important. So if you can come up with 10 things that are important to do, you don't need to know which one of those are the most important. Just do one. The only problem with what me and Vasco has suggested here now, the only problem that we might have with this is if you have really, really slow iterations. So if I pick something that is super important and do it for a year, then it becomes super important that I pick the most important thing. Otherwise, I might have done the second to most important thing for a year. If you do it for a couple of days or a week, even if it turns out to be the totally wrong thing, it doesn't matter.
And the interesting thing with what you just said is that argument is often used to justify not having faster iterations and to have more planning. Yeah. When it would be a lot better from a decision-making point of view to have shorter iterations and faster feedback.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
So, Marcus, we're getting close to the end here, and of course, we've talked a lot about theory of constraints, and you've mentioned the goal, and I'll definitely put the link on the show notes to that book. If you haven't read it yet, it is a must for anyone working with process improvement.
Yeah.
But if you have a book, a video, a blog, a podcast that you would recommend for people to dive into and learn more about the process you just described for us, what would that be?
Yeah, so when it comes to theory constraints, it starts and ends with the goal, but there are some really good. I actually researched it in the beginning here. So if you just search for theory constraints introduction, there are some really good animated videos where people explain this in a nice way, because it's good to see it visualized. When it comes to books that has been very instrumental for me to think about, I don't think if it's straight very related to this, but you can start to see this kind of thinking in any kind of process once you have the tool in your tool belt, so to speak. And one book that I cannot recommend enough is Turn the Ship Around by David Marquis. What they did that is related to this is that they actually turned the decision making around, and it was because David Marquis, a captain of a submarine, he just realized that I'm not only the bottleneck for decisions here, but I also the guy that knows the least about how this submarine works. So and yeah, that's a bit dangerous when you're on a nuclear submarine, but he made it work. Luckily, he's still around. So yeah. And it's a really, really good book and an immensely good story. And there's an animated 8 minutes summary of that book that I cannot recommend enough either. So I can pass you the link to that one.
Absolutely. We'll put the links on the description below after this session. Well, we're getting close to the end though, Marcus. And as it often is, I would like you to tell our viewers, where can they find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
So right now, I just realized that right now I'm not on many social media. So the best way of finding out something more about me would probably be on LinkedIn. Just find my name, or I have a blog which I'm abusing. Sadly, I'm not outputting as much as I used to, but it's on marcusoft.net. So that's my handle across the internet. So that's it. I actually jumped off the Twitter for a couple of different reasons, but I have not been drawn back yet.
The Twitter train crash.
Yeah, it's not even called Twitter anymore, right? So X, but I don't know.
I will always call it Twitter. Like, why would I change the name?
Yeah, it's there's so much to talk about there. But what is a tweet called now? Is it an X or what is it?
Let's not go there. All right. So, Marcus, one last parting word of advice for our viewers that stayed until the end. Thank you, everybody, and don't forget to like the video and share with your friends. So one parting word of advice, Marcus.
Yeah, that would probably be what bit me, was that even though the bottleneck is in your face with a blue cast around it, that might not be the bottleneck. So start off trying to solve it, and you will find the real bottleneck, and the solution might be something very different than you initially thought.
Yeah, absolutely. You will always find the real bottleneck.
Yep.
Marcus, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being with us. And everybody, don't forget to reach out to Marcus on LinkedIn, and why not send them a few follow-up questions. I'll see you all later.